I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the transgender umbrella. For those who haven't, I am sorry, I'm going to have to introduce this to you. It's effectively a concept that encompasses any individual who crosses over or challenges their society's traditional gender roles or expressions. Previously, this only really referred to transsexual people, that is, those with gender dysphoria, but the trans activists have been fighting a quite successful war at getting that pesky diagnosis removed, enabling anyone to say that they are trans, including masculine women, feminine men, two-spirit, third gender, gender queer, drag queens and kings, cross-dressers, transvestites, you name it, they fall under the umbrella now. And it is quite interesting because the whole idea behind this umbrella is to respect everyone's gender identity, that whatever you say you are, everyone has to accept it without question. That this is how that you get non-binary people, for example, who don't do any kind of transition, but people will flip out at you if you refer to them as anything but a they, them. Now, some groups in this umbrella don't really sound that they belong there. A good example is masculine women. Are you really going to tell a group of butch lesbians that they're actually not women? I don't think that's really going to go down very well. There's one particular group, however, that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I finally get the chance to, and it's funny the way in which they wind up the trans activists, and that is traps. Yes, I finally get to talk about traps in a legitimate video for my channel. So what's a trap? Well, a trap is effectively a guy who wants to look as feminine as possible, but is still very happy with being a guy. In fact, they like the idea that they are a guy who looks like a girl. A lot of this normally comes from anime. There's some quite famous anime characters. I'm not the biggest weeb in the world, so I can't really name all of them, but if you know a lot about anime, you've probably come across quite a few of them in your time. Now, they would quite easily fit under this trans umbrella, shouldn't they? I mean, they are men who are crossing over or challenging their gender identity. Well, not really, they're just men who want to be as girly as possible. But the trans activists don't necessarily like this. I mean, hell, if you look at this particular picture of the trans umbrella, you'll see there's a man pointing out that it's not for anyone else to put down your identity other than yourself, that your identity is what you say and that's it. But it shouldn't really surprise you that there is actually quite a high number of trans activists out there who think that actually traps are trans women, or just trans women who haven't quite realised that they're trans yet. And so they start to put pressure on these guys to come out as something that they're actually not. Don't believe me? Well, I've been able to find quite a few tweets that kind of build my point somewhat. To the femboys who plague this world, why don't you just do gender reassignment surgery? The only reason they don't call themselves trans yet is because they're cowardly and transphobic enough to fool themselves into thinking they're just femboy on HRT for the aesthetics, genuine sitcom material TBH. Pro tip, if you're questioning your gender for more than a week or two, it probably means you're not cis. Cis people usually don't need to convince themselves they're actually their assigned gender. Obviously, there's a good portion of femboys who are cis. Nope. Everyone who is a femboy is just an advanced egg. They're trans girls and non-binary people really far into denial. If you wear female clothes all day, every day, not hidden, not under male clothes, you have some soul searching to do. You have soul searching to do because if you are living that way, there are laws that protect your right to do so. By those laws on the actual books in real life, you are transgender. Those laws protect your rights. We fought for them. You're welcome. Obvious egg, I might be trans. Fem boyfriend, no, I'm not trans and neither are you. Me, an enlightened NB. Actually, you're both trans. Not only that, a lot of the femboys will get accused of internalized transphobia. I'll never understand why they just can't accept it. Internalized transphobia screaming from the rooftops. And those who really speak out against this and try and stress the fact that no, they are guys, do sometimes end up getting outright removed from social media, such as this post back in August, mass reporting someone that doesn't want to transition, doesn't see themselves as trans, again, toxic LGBT community showing they have a shit ton of unnecessary power on this hell site. I never want to see people say that this never happens ever again. Or how about this one? He is angry that trans people bully him for being a feminine man, but trans people should bully him more for being an actual terrible person. Disappointed that people like him aren't the ones being pushed towards suicide. So why is this so controversial? I mean, I thought the whole idea behind the trans movement was to accept people as who they are. Somebody who is a femboy or a trap is just a guy who wants to be as feminine as possible, but he's still happy with being a guy. Him being that way, regardless of his reasons for doing so, he might just want to do it for fun. Maybe it's a sexual thing. Who really cares if they're not harming anyone, right? Well, it seems to be that trans activists feel very threatened by their own existence, some of which claim that words like trap are openly transphobic, even though they actually have nothing to do with trans women. A trap refers to an incredibly feminine guy who looks like a girl. Okay, it's part of a trope of you are tricked into having sex with them, but they are still a guy. They're very different to a trans woman. And on top of that, a lot of traps actually look incredibly feminine and do a much better job at passing than, say, your average trans activist. But I don't think that it's so much the jealousy there, but more that of control. Trans activists have set up this umbrella as a way of getting everybody into the same space, and when groups like to do that, they like to control the way in which people think. When you have a group that ultimately queers their own definitions of queer, they're not going to stand for it because they're an outlier, and it just so happens to be that a lot of femboys or traps also are quite edgy as well. But what's really interesting is that the femboy movement, so to speak, has taken up the place of more traditional groups like cross-dressers. Years ago, cross-dressers would have made out that they are not trans women, they are not women, they are just guys who want to dress up as women. I remember a very specific Eddie Izzard skit from years ago where he talked about being out for a drink and there was a guy laughing at him because he was a man dressed as a woman. The guy comes over and asks if he's a man dressed as a woman. Eddie just responds, "Yes, I am." But now, Eddie just says that he is trans. He's accepted his part of the trans umbrella. And that seems to be happening with a lot of cross-dressers as well. They've effectively given up their own unique identity to join this homogenous movement, and the femboys are the ones who are effectively taking their place. The trouble with all of this is that you're having groups telling people that they are trans when they are not, and especially when they start to put pressure on people to transition when they shouldn't be. This can be incredibly dangerous, not so much from the medical side, not just from the medical side, but also from their own psyche and their own understanding of who they are. You can't really be telling people that they are trans when they're not. It's simply not fair on them. And what's more, I find it very interesting that they have problems with traps identifying as men, but when you get a man who simply just says that they are a them and that's it, you are a bigot if you don't refer to them as that way. Why is it almost like a double standard here? Why is only one group protected in this, but not the other? Why is it the absolute no efforts are the ones where you've got to respect their pronouns, but don't you dare respect the pronouns of this man who says he's a man? Like, it seems completely backwards. Now, I think that a lot of the trap side of things is kind of, it's a lot more of a bit of fun than anything else. They're not taking this whole identity thing incredibly seriously. They're not wearing it on their sleeves and carving out, trap rights or marching in the streets or telling people they can't have meetings and they can't debate their very existence. They're just kind of pointing out the ridiculousness of them being guys who just want to dress as women, and that's effectively it. And you have a movement telling them that no, they're not allowed to do that without calling themselves trans. This is quite troubling when you look at other potential groups that are also put into the trans umbrella. As I mentioned earlier, butch lesbians, but if you're a tomboy, like, there are people in the trans movement who are actually saying that, it's absolutely disgusting to be a tomboy and just come out as trans already. They want people, even when they are being very kind of confident in their own gender identity and saying that, no, I am a man, they're telling people that actually, no, you're not. You are this gender, or you should be this, or you need to question this. They're wanting to get more and more people into their movement. The topic of this video sounds quite funny, but there's actually a serious message behind it. They should not be trying to tell people that they're trans when they're not. This is the problem when you completely remove any kind of definition of what it is to be trans. It has always been, up until recently, simply about being a transsexual, having that gender dysphoria. If you don't have gender dysphoria, then no, you're not going to be trans, I'm sorry to say. But these people seem to want to push everybody into this one group, regardless of who they are, regardless of who they say they are. And they're the ones that are telling them that no, they're not allowed to identify. It's kind of troubling, especially when they're going to branch out this umbrella more and more and start to get more vulnerable groups involved. At least a lot of femboys can kind of hold their own online. When you get to more confused teenagers, as we're kind of seeing already with the mass referrals to gender identity clinics, it's going to become a huge problem. I'm hoping that the trans activists will kind of understand their own argument here, and that if people say that they are not trans, don't tell them that they are just an egg. An egg is a expression for somebody who hasn't quite come out yet. They have the right to simply say that they are men. They're not taking away anybody else's labels. They simply got one of their own. Don't try and colonize it and bring it into your own bizarre mess of an identity. But what are your thoughts on the video I've done this week? Is there anything in particular I've missed out? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. You can also support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. Please also hit the notification button as well, because I have noticed that YouTube has kind of deprioritized my channel somewhat, and my views recently have taken quite a hit, and I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you all next time. And a special thanks to Alex Meadows, Alyssa Morris, Casey Adolphson, Dan Norman, Fenella Cooney, Glesley Lever, Holly Mahone, James C. George, Janine Karen, Jess, Joe, Kim Vandry, Latin Creature, Laura Manleaf, Moy Felicita, Ricardo Jose, Steve Hendricks, Tennessee Barfly, The Poor of Rizzo, Traname Girl, Zoe, Illiterati, Stephen Hansen, Laisha, James UK, and the rest of my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar.